At this point in the term, we are going to move into your final major assignment, which is the research essay, which involves four assignments, which are the topic pitch assignment, where you will pitch three topics based on the parameters of the assignment. One will be approved for you and you will move forward with it. The second one is an annotated bibliography, where you will take your research sources and evaluate why and how they're good sources to use for your project. The third will be the research essay outline, where you are synthesizing all of those sources and coming up with your argument that follows the classical argument structure. And then finally, you will turn in a complete research essay. So for essay 2, you will write a research paper by developing a research topic related to an issue presented in one of the stories we've read this term. Approach. Consider the stories we've read this term, identifying ideas explored in those works that interest you and that you might research for your essay. For example, Girl explores gender roles in Caribbean culture. Honey Boy explores cultural changes during the civil rights movement. The Things They Carried explores the effects of war on one's psyche. Keep in mind, the aforementioned are merely examples. You may choose almost any issue presented in any of the stories we've read this term. From there, you will begin the research process by developing a research topic, refining it, collecting research, and synthesizing those ideas into an essay. While the story you choose is a springboard for your idea, this essay is not intended to be an analysis of that story. Rather, it is a researched exploration of an issue presented in the text. The most successful essays do not incorporate the story at all. You were just coming up with an idea based on a concept, theme, or issue presented in the story. Again, here, you are not going to be writing about the story. You're coming up with an idea for a story. So I'm going to take you through now a number of ideas for each story. This was a collaboration that my previous class did that was face-to-face. So if we're thinking about the story Snow, we may talk about country life versus city life because they go to the country from the city. You might research communication in relationships. There's a pool in the story, so perhaps you consider what pool ownership looks like. It deals with snow and winter weather, so you could look at how weather affects mood. Seasonal affective disorder is a real thing. You could look at snow in general, though I'm not really sure what you would do there. It would probably go into this idea of weather and its effect on the psyche. Death and grief. We see the character Alan dies. You could look at power dynamics in relationships and how those impact the relationships. You could talk about how love relates to the cold, married life, weather and big storms. Weather is an overarching idea that this class came up with. When we think about weather and big storms, you may think about, here in Florida, we don't necessarily deal with snow a whole lot, but we do have big hurricane type storms that come through. So you can be pretty broad with this. You could look at differing perspectives in relationships, renovating homes because they improve the home when they move there. And then the power of nostalgia. The whole story is really about the main character's sense of nostalgia for the past. Thinking about the story of an hour, you could look at freedom, isolation, gratitude, heart disease, gender roles. You could look at oppression and repression, railroads or potential railroad accidents. You could look at how people treat those they believe fragile. You could look at the idea of how people behave in public versus how they behave in private and why there's a disconnect in the two. You could look at forms of communication. You could look at women's rights. You could look at grief. You could look at spiritual awakenings. We see that with Miss Mallard. You can look at misinformation. You could look at the impacts of sudden death on those who are left behind. You can talk about how seasons affect mood. We see the use of new spring life in that story that improves Miss Mallard's mood as she's having an awakening. And you could talk about illusion. All right. Thinking about Girl, you might look at problems with being taught to be ladylike or too focused on reputation. You look at acceptance, cooking, abusive parental attitudes, mother-daughter relationships, roles of women over time, misogyny, childhood trauma by unintentionally harmful parents, Caribbean culture or lifestyles, coming of age, verbal abuse, parenting styles, fashion, promiscuity, effects of trauma or abuse on child development, stereotypes, homemaking, slut shaming or not, parent-child relationships. So there's lots of here to choose from. I had a student who put fashion on this board, and um, even though the story isn't about necessarily the fashion industry, what it does dive into is how to care for fabrics and laundry and things of that nature. So if you're really interested in fashion, perhaps there is some sort of argument that you could research to make here. For 10 things, we get that list of 10 things that our narrator's dealing with. You could look at regret, moving on after losing a spouse, communication, vulnerability in relationships, spending time with loved ones, grief, books, how listing helps people manage hard situations or stress, organization, insecurity, avocados, types of love language, nature's effects on house life, so like rats, bugs, ghosts, income disparity within relationships, dogs, guilt, honesty, taking things for granted, time, sudden death, cheating, how bad things happen at parties, baseball. We see them go to a baseball game. If you're into baseball, you could look at baseball. Maybe I would consider letting you move beyond baseball into a different sport. For Honey Boy, we have segregation, guns, how or why or if people can change, sacrifice, bullying, gangs, pools, revenge, racism, cleanliness, and we think about the pools and their cleanliness and how people are using their tax dollars to care for community property, fear versus respect, hero type figures, interracial relationships, self-defense, civil rights, violence, gun riots, racially motivated violence, any number of types of violence, sibling relationships. All of these are ideas that come from Honey Boy. For muddling, you might look at something like gas prices or inflation, taxidermy, those animals that have been stuffed, stereotypes, and why they're dangerous or inaccurate or how people defy them, local business, divorce, online marketplaces, driving in circles, street sellers, hoarding, taking responsibility for actions, economic change, paranoia, berries and jam, music, cheating, how to protect oneself, hunting, at-home business. For the things they carried, you can consider emotional burdens and how they impact us psychologically, fear of being judged, marijuana use, daydreaming, distractions, obsession, objectification, letter writing as the lost art, leadership styles and responsibility, escapism, stalking, military, impacts of war, comfort objects, blaming yourself, perhaps rightfully or perhaps not so rightfully. Regardless of which way you go with any of these topics, you're looking to write an argument paper, which means you need to choose a topic and it needs to be something that you can make an argument about, that you could perhaps propose solutions for, because again, this is an argument paper. So let's go into organization. You will start your essay with an introductory paragraph that engages the reader, provides background regarding the issue and the importance of the topic, and will conclude with your thesis statement. Your thesis should include your purpose, take a position, and outline the intentions of your paper. I provided an example. You can look at it. It's not what your paper is going to be about. It's just an example. Once you make it to the body of your paper, you can choose the writing pattern of your choice, but the key is to work to support the stance you have taken in your thesis statement by presenting a synthesized review of the research you found. For most students, it makes sense to use the classical argument structure. This is really what I expect you to use because it makes it easy to make sure you have all parts of an effective argument. So you start with paragraph 1, which is an introduction. This will be an introductory paragraph where you will grab your reader's attention and provide your thesis. 2, narration, another paragraph. In this section, you'll present your issue and any background about the problem. So this is similar to the introduction, but the introduction is more broad level, narrowing to a thesis. The narration section is background information your reader might need to know, facts or statistics or things about the problem to help your reader understand. Section 3 will be your confirmation, and this will take you 2 to 3 paragraphs. In this section, you'll present your case, providing solutions to the problem and evidence from your sources to support your proposed solutions or actions your readers might need to take based on the information you're presenting. Then in section 4, you're going to have a refutation, and this is going to take 1 to 2 paragraphs. In this section, you will address what the opposition might say to counter your suggested changes, and you will refute those claims one point at a time, providing clear proof that your position is the best option. You will need research evidence to help you refute any arguments. To be clear, for each body paragraph, so whether you're in narration, confirmation, or refutation sections of your paper, you are required at least 2 examples from your research. So, and when I say examples, I mean quotes from your research to support what you were suggesting. And then in section 5, you'll have your conclusion. You will conclude your argument with a brief summary of your main points and a call to action for the reader. For your introduction and conclusion, generally you are not going to include any of your sources there, but you will have, like I said before, at least two examples from your research for narration, confirmation, refutation. So here are the requirements for your paper. You're required 5 sources, 3 articles found through the Valencia Library databases, and 2 websites. You'll have a 1,500 word minimum and 7 to 9 paragraphs. So that will be your introductory paragraph, your 5 body paragraphs, and conclusion. So if we go back to this structure here, intro's 1 paragraph, conclusion's 1 paragraph. You can get your other 5 by having 1 narration paragraph, 3 confirmation, and 1 refutation. Or you could have 2 confirmation and 2 refutation. You can kind of pick and choose there. But this will get you the paragraphs that you need. And then there's basic writing information. You will use MLA. In order to do this properly, anytime you have a quote that you're using, you must have an in-text citation and a citation in your works cited page. You are restricted to your 5 sources, 3 articles found through the Valencia Library databases, and 2 credible websites. When you get to the annotated bibliography assignment later on, you will be evaluating your 5 sources there that you are going to use, and they're the ones you should be using for the entirety of your paper. I have provided a sample. I'm not going to read all of it to you, but I do want you to understand that it does follow that classical argument structure. I want you to see how the student is incorporating sources. Notice that while some paragraphs may only use 1 source, many of these paragraphs synthesize sources into using multiple sources in the same paragraph. That's generally what we expect of academic scholarly writing at this collegiate level. I also, you see all of the in-text citations. There is an error here. He's using a comma in between last name and page number. We don't do that. There wouldn't be a comma there generally. And then we have his works cited page. Notice the use of the hanging indent for all of his sources that are electronic, which in most cases, all of your sources are going to be electronic, although he had one that was not. You'll include an access date. The reason we do that is so that if the source changes in between the time you last viewed it and when I'm grading your essay, you wouldn't lose any points if there's an inaccuracy there. Because I do look at your sources closely when reading and evaluating your essays. And that's that for his paper. I encourage you to look at it closely. You will see his annotated bibliography when you get to that assignment and his outline when you get to the outline assignment. So it all goes together for one student who did a really nice job on his paper. And so I think that might be helpful to you. However, his topic related to Native Americans would be totally off limits for your class because I don't think it would be fair. Also, keep in mind your topic must be approved by me, which will happen in your feedback to the topic pitch assignment. There are a few topics that are generally off limits, including abortion, the legalization of marijuana, and most illnesses. And it's because it's hard to build an argument that is new and has fresh information. You maybe could do something with abortion or contraception, but there's really nothing new to add to the idea of legalization of marijuana. And like I say, most illnesses, unless you are a medical major, if you're going into nursing or you hope to become a doctor, maybe we could talk about illnesses. But I generally encourage you to steer away from those.
this was just a brief overview. I encourage you to look far more closely at both the um, assignment instructions as well as the sample essay so that you fully understand what is expected of you. Over the course of the module, you are going to learn about how to research, and then you will do your topic pitch and then your annotated bibliography. And that's going to be this first part of your research assignment. Then you will get into outlining and then drafting and finalizing your essay. I hope this video helps. And if you have questions, please let me know.